It's the Church of Jesus Christ. January, let's start with you. Describe for our audience what happened to your daughter. How was the school working behind the scenes and really behind your back as a parent, and what that moment was like as a parent?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. So this was back in 2020 at the height of COVID. In the spring, our daughter, who was 13 at the time, came to my husband and I and told us she no longer felt like a girl. And this was out of the blue. She had no previous signs of distress over her sex, but it came shortly after 3 of her friends at school had also started suddenly identifying as some form of transgender. So fast forward about 7 weeks, we finally got an in-person meeting with the principal of the middle school. And that was the first time we were shown the transgender support plan, is what they call it, but it's really a social transition plan. This is a formal plan they took from an organization called Gender Spectrum. You can look it up. And it was a 6-page plan where they sat our 13-year-old daughter behind closed doors with 3 adults. That was the assistant principal, the school counselor, and a social worker I had never met. So that power dynamic alone is a huge red flag. But this plan went well beyond name and pronouns. They asked her which restroom and locker room she preferred to use, which sex she preferred to room with on overnight field trips. And so, I was very angry, I was confused, and we continued to press the school district, show us the legal justification for you meeting with our child without notifying us or inviting us to that meeting. And we were finally shown the Leon County LGBTQ guide. This was a 36-page guide that explicitly painted parents to be a danger to their own children with no due process. And Pastor Rob, I want to be clear, this was not an isolated case. When I really dug into the research and looked at school districts all over Florida and all over the country, they had these same secret transition policies in place, cutting parents out of these critical medical, psychosocial decisions being made. And it just became very clear that this issue was systemic. And it started around 2016 in Florida, when Equality Florida started infiltrating the school system under the guise of non-discrimination and anti-bullying policies.
It's amazing. As you were telling your story, and I thank you for sharing that, I went from sad to angry, so I appreciate you saying that you were angry. To think, I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and just living in Florida, I just can't imagine what that experience was like for you. So thank you for sharing that story. Amy, your story intersects in a different way. Your daughter actually went forward with surgeries. Kind of explain that process to our audience, and how is she doing today?
So going back a little bit farther, this was 2014. When she was 14, she announced kind of overnight that she was transgender, and I did not know the year before we'd lived in Oregon that she was being indoctrinated at school and then further indoctrinated online. She ran away, and she was
She's how old now?
She was 16 at that time.
16 at that time, okay.
She was 16. And she told Child Protective Services that I was neglecting her medical health because I would not allow her to go on wrong sex hormones. And I was investigated by that department and forced to meet with a transgender identifying female and some social workers, and they told me that I was to refer to my daughter as my son, and I refused to do that and just refused to go along with any of it. And so shortly before her 17th birthday, she took off to Portland. But prior to this, while she was in shelter, she went to a pediatric endocrinologist in Arizona and was able to get testosterone which I later found a video of this doctor showing her how to shoot herself up with testosterone at the age of 16. She was still a little girl. And so at 17, in Portland, Oregon, without my consent or knowledge, she had a double mastectomy and hysterectomy. Oregon law allows children who are over the age of 14 to make medical decisions without their parents' knowledge if it's outpatient. So they did both of these surgeries, the mastectomy and the hysterectomy, and discharged her basically into homelessness. And she's not doing well.
What do you know now that you wish you knew before concerning this false ideology?
Well, it's a giant psyop, for one. The worst gift I gave my daughter was a smartphone. And I wish that I had not sent her to government propaganda indoctrination centers, also known as schools.
Yeah, and I want to just say something about that, because I think it's really important to understand that kids have an identity crisis are nothing new. Adolescents, they're constantly searching and seeking and trying on different things to see what works for them, what doesn't. But at the heart of this, for most of these kids, is a deep sense of self-hatred. And they are being celebrated for it.
Yeah.
My daughter, at age 13 and 14, was telling us she wanted to cut her breast off. They call it top surgery. It's a euphemism. There is so much encouragement to disassociate from one's body. It's very similar to an eating disorder. And so, I often ask people, would you offer diet pills or liposuction to a girl suffering from anorexia? Because cutting the breast off of girls as young as 12, which is what is happening in our country, is exactly the same. And so in terms of smartphones, I completely agree. We made that mistake. And as a clinician, I do not recommend giving a smartphone to any child under the age of 16. Their brains are not mature enough to handle what's coming at them, and they are highly, highly addictive.
Yeah.
And so we have alternatives now,
Yep.
thankfully, that are kind of dumber phones that don't have access to apps or internet.
Right.
So you can still communicate with your child and track your child, and the reasons that I hear parents say that they need the phone.
Yeah, of course. I love that you called schools indoctrination camps, because that really is what they are, unfortunately. And I'm also reminded that this is not, we've been using the word ideology, and I think that we need to continue to use that word, because this is not, I think a lot of people hear discussions like this and it's more of a political battle, it's more of a political issue, but it really is a battle of worldviews. It's a battle of ideologies for the hearts and minds of our children. What have you learned about this false ideology that you wish you would have known years ago?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's important for your audience to understand this is a false belief system. And it's being taught as if it's fact. And so what kids are being taught from a very early age, some states have it embedded in K through 12 curriculum. But what they're being taught is that we have a so-called gender identity that's completely separate from our sex. And this gender identity is an internal sense or a feeling of your gender. And so they're teaching children that they can choose to be a boy, girl, neither, or both. You have to fully inoculate your children from a very early age over and over and over from this false belief system, because it's not a matter of if, it's when they are exposed. There are hundreds of families that are having success walking their children through this confusion, because the truth is, if you don't socially or medically transition these children, the vast majority of these kids will desist in their confusion over their sex. So parents, don't give up hope. Reach out to us. We're happy to help, and they can get through this.
Awesome.